Alright, so this is a follow-up to my last video. Gonna go ahead and start the drill and be brave just because I haven't run it since I finished the last video. Trying to actually make some progress here with getting this hole expanded out. But while this is running, I'm gonna be especially brave and not actually watch it too closely. Haven't actually tested the fix to that cargo capacity thing, so hopefully it'll go back up where it's supposed to. I think I found that bug. Anyway, we are gonna just kind of take a tour around here while this is running, and then we'll do another video to actually go through the code. This one hopefully won't end up being too long. Anyway, here we go. So this is kind of the main feature of the drill head. It's the biggest part. You can't really go anywhere without colliding into it unless you're down on the drilling platform. Obviously this is the cargo container. As big as it is and as much room as it takes up, it's actually less than half the total cargo capacity of this thing. Most of it's actually in the drills down here. Since there's so many drills, there's 25 drills with 23,000 and change liters of cargo capacity each, which adds up to about 500,000 liters of cargo capacity, or 600,000 rather, I'm sorry, 600,000 liters of cargo capacity, give or take. Whereas this is, oops, wrong up. This one is 421,000. So, still kind of the main thing connecting everything. There's a conveyor junction or two underneath this before you get to the drills, and then there's the connector tube up on top. So this is kind of the main conveyor network here for getting the ore in from the drill and then out the connector to the scaffold and then on to wherever. So that's that part. This is the programming block. Obviously this is what's making everything happen. I got some button panels here. So this button panel is all about kind of fixing the alignment. I showed that off briefly, I think, in the last video. Turns on and off the block, the programming block. Changes the clamps, switches the connector, and this one reverses the locking pistons so that it can kind of jostle it into place. Should be mining now, and that's why we slowed down. We are still in expansion mode, so when one drill is kind of drilling at capacity, which essentially means, well, in the code means 1 liter per tick. I don't know if that's actually the capacity, but that's where we're slowing down to make sure we don't move too fast and get the drills jammed up. These are the pistons here that are actually walking us down these guide rails. The guide rails are being constructed by this welder on the fly from a very small blueprint of 6 light armor blocks coming from a projector up there at the top of the scaffold that's being advanced by a programming block up in the scaffold, attached to that. I had initially thought that I might have to control that through antennas, which would have been significantly more complicated, but it turns out I can just do it all based on information contained in the programming block itself, and the API for that, and decide when to advance the projection and when to pull it back. So yeah, these pistons are walking us down that guide rail. It locks, expands to push us down, unlocks, and then retracts, while the other one's doing the same thing. So we're always connected by one of these clamps. At least we're supposed to be. There have been times when we were not, and therefore the entire drill fell down to the bottom of the hole, which has happened so many times, and there's been so many reloads as we've gone through this process of developing this. It's been lots of fun. Anyway, so that's how we're walking down and getting into the hole and moving down further as we drill, and then walking back up afterwards, basically just by reversing the process. So instead of locking to extend the piston, we lock to retract the piston to go up, and that's all controlled by the scripting block. When Kozaki did this in the original video, they were doing that all on timer blocks, which honestly I think is a little bit more complicated than scripting, but I am a computer programmer by trade, so programming is relatively straightforward to me, whereas working out the timing and hoping that it turns out correctly every time, it's a little bit more of an act of faith in my mind to do that on a timer block. But kudos to them for getting it to work that way. I just think it's a little bit more flexible and a little bit more robust to have it running on a scripting block, so that's how I'm building mine. This button panel here controls the scripting block. It issues the various commands to the scripting block. You can run the scripting block with an argument in addition to it being run on the tick frequency. Then when you run it with an argument, I've basically got some global variables in there that have their values changed based on the argument that you provide to the programming block when you run it. So we've got abort on the far left here. That's number one. It's also number one on all four of the toolbars I'm using here in the flight seat, just so that it's easily accessible. So when something starts to go horribly wrong, we can immediately start moving back up. So it'll reverse the direction so that instead of walking down, it's walking up. And it will also set the hold condition so that when it gets up to the top, it will stay there instead of coming back down once the cargo is empty. Because by default, when it's not in the hold condition, once the cargo is completely empty, it will then immediately release and start moving back down the scaffold. If you want to, make some changes to the programming block, or if you need to fix your alignment or whatever, you will definitely want to hold position there, because otherwise you can end up trying to do that in the middle of a walk, and then you will end up disconnecting from both clamps, and you will end up falling down to the bottom of the hole, which is a fairly recurring theme, falling down into the bottom of the hole. So that's what abort does, is it immediately sets you to moving up and sets that hold condition. Button 2 is just to set the hold condition, so if you don't want to necessarily go immediately back up, but you do want to stay up when you get there, you can set the hold condition. I usually use that when I'm actually going to make a change to the script. I'm like, oh, I've noticed an issue, usually with the output on the text panel, that I want to fix, but I don't necessarily need to go back up right away, and I don't want to interrupt the program, and I don't want to have something in some weird condition when I actually restart the scripting block after I compile and save changes. So I'll just put it on hold. Then when it does get back up there, it'll stay put, and I can make those changes in relative safety with the merge blocks locking us into place so that we don't end up falling down into the bottom of the hole, again with that beam. Number 3 is set to reverse, and that will just reverse whichever direction you're currently going. So if you're going up, it will make you go down. If you're going down, it will make you go up. Haven't really used that one too much lately. That was more useful in the beginning when we were doing a lot more walking up and down while I was getting the pistons part working correctly, the walking actually working correctly. Did a lot more reversing at that point. But now the abort is probably the most frequently used one when something starts going horribly wrong, followed closely by hold, which I will sometimes use to actually just clear the hold condition from abort, so that when it goes up, I'm like, oh, okay, this isn't so bad. When it finishes going up, I can just bring it back down. But really, you can use 2 and 3 to reverse everything that happens with abort, so you can tell it to go back down and clear the hold condition when it does get back up there. Number 4 is recently set up to do the expansion mode. I mentioned that we've been having some issues keeping the clamps lined up on the guide rails. I think that situation seems to be fixed, seeing as how we're still very well centered, despite the fact that we're getting down into this hole now. I think that's because I reduced the torque very much on the advanced rotor that's controlling the drills, and I'll show you the drilling platform in just a minute. But because I reduced the torque there, I think that when we do get the drills a little bit stuck, we're not pushing enough force on that rotor to actually cause the entire platform to shift back the other way, and that's helping us stay centered on these guide rails here. But one of the ways I wanted to do that was by kind of giving a little bit more room on this scaffold, because we were still burying about 1/4 to 1/2 of the scaffold back in the rock. So now we're expanding the hole, diameter-wise, so it's a little bit wider. I did that by adding another drill on the end. It was just 5 drills in addition to the one on the center, and 4 spokes going around. Now it's 6. But because of that, we're doing a lot more drilling on the way down than we were initially, because before we would basically be able to go all the way down to the bottom, just shaving a little bit of rock off the sides, before we did the brunt of the mining down at the bottom with all 25 drills. Now we're doing a pretty good amount of mining on the way down, but only with 1 drill. So we need to have a mode here where we're triggering the mining mode, where we slow down the pistons so as to avoid locking up the drills, and reducing the total cargo capacity, such that once those 4 drills and the large cargo container are full, we'll go back up, because we're not actually able to measure how much ore we're getting if we're not collecting any of it because the containers for it are all full. So that expansion mode is doing that. It's basically reducing that threshold for slowing down the platform and reducing the total cargo capacity before we go back up. And that can just be toggled by pressing the button on the 4 here. Again, another command into the programming block. That's the reactor, obviously. Since this is creative mode, we're running everything off of a completely empty nuclear reactor. In survival, we would need to replace most of the floor, most likely with batteries, and either that or have some uranium up on the scaffold here that we're able to pipe into the reactor when we go back up to connect and make sure that we're putting out enough power to run everything. I think this is a pretty minimal power requirement, power drain. I haven't really paid too much attention to how much power we're actually using here. Yeah, it's less than a megawatt, so I mean less than half a megawatt even, 266 kilowatts here. So we're not using a whole lot of power to run the drills and run the programming block and run the pistons and the rotors. There's not a whole lot of power being drained here, so it should be relatively straightforward keeping it up and running, and shouldn't require too much charge. I think the limiting factor in how quickly you have to go up and down is really going to be the cargo capacity rather than power issues in survival, but we will eventually need to worry a little bit more about power issues, and that will require some expansions to the script that haven't been written yet. Since we're in creative, we don't have to worry too much about that. They definitely need to get this a little bit more reliable before we worry too much about that kind of upgrade. And we are still moving here, just moving very slowly because we are actually mining. See, we're mining. We've probably gotten to the rim of where the expansion's happening. So that's the pistons we've gone over, the cargo container, the button panels, the power situation. There's a remote control block here. The remote control block is configured more or less the same way as the flight seat. The flight seat's really the better way to control this at this point. I need to update the commands on the remote control block. But I was initially just using a passenger seat here right in front of the computer, the programmable block. It turns out you can't actually activate any of this stuff from the passenger seat, so it wasn't really all that useful to have the passenger seat here. But it was, just kind of an initial thing. But starting from there, you could then access the remote control, and then you would have, commands that you could issue through the toolbars and get access to the cameras and all that good stuff. So the remote control block might actually not be necessary at this point, but it's still there just so that we can, access at least some of the commands that we would have available in the flight seat from, anywhere on the platform, including downstairs with the actual drills. Got catwalks around here just for, safety purposes. Not that we really need to worry all that much about safety, but it's just, while we're running around here, it's nice not to accidentally fall off of it. And then there's a merge block underneath the programming block. That wasn't initially there, and the programming block only connects on the bottom. So when I removed the light armor that was there to install the merge block, the programming panel fell down to the bottom of the hole, which is why I have... Where is it? This little ship, which I just put together real quick so I could go down and pick up the programming block and make sure I copied my program before I built a new one, because I had my script in there and I hadn't published it anywhere and hadn't saved it anywhere else. So that was where all of the code was, and losing it would have been very annoying. So I had to go down and recover that. So yeah, joys of not really being all that good at this game, other than wanting to fool around with the programming aspects. Anyway, there's another merge block over here, so we've got it on two different axes. The two that are we're most concerned about it losing alignment, obviously up and down being the third axis, but it's supposed to go up and down, so we don't have to worry about aligning it on that axis. And then this ladder here kind of fits with the other ladder up at the top on the scaffold, so that you can get access to the drill and get access to the catwalk, going one direction or the other without needing to use your jetpack. Again, obviously in creative mode, that's not a big deal because we've got unlimited fuel for the jetpack. But if you were in survival and you were, at all concerned about your fuel usage, you would have that option. The only other thing, I guess, to cover upstairs is, we can cover this downstairs too, really, but since we're here, this is the small cargo container that has the steel plates. I did show this in the previous video, but then this is connected through a conveyor junction that is underneath the piston to the welder, and the welder is got its conveyor access up and down, so immediately below that is the grinder. So we're welding this as we go down and grinding it as we come up, and that is necessary. I tried doing it without the grinder at first, just building as we go down and keeping it there. But there is an issue if we are close enough to the scaffold to weld it, and close enough to the rock, to the wall and the hole to drill it out, so that we can actually place it and weld it. The drill binds against the rail and is unable to spin freely. So we do actually need to grind this out, because you can see right now, especially with that 6th drill on the end there, we are passing right through the rail. So without grinding it up, we would definitely be colliding every time we came back up. And that's, not a good thing. Obviously we want to be able to rotate this freely. So yeah, that is definitely all of upstairs. There's a ladder here that goes downstairs. Really, this placement is not ideal because you can't climb up the ladder and go straight into the flight seat. That's kind of an obstruction there, and this clips, you can't walk through that on either side. Oh, turns out you can. I didn't realize you could do that. Anyway, so now we're downstairs. It's fairly loud down here, but hopefully I've got my sound settings adjusted on OBS such that it's keeping it quiet enough that I can talk at a relatively normal volume. And one of the issues that we had while we were getting things not broken, broke one of these glass panes here, so let me just replace that real quick. If I can rotate it correctly, there we go. And this is just nice so that we can, stand over an open pit, see what's going on. Looks like we filled up our cargo capacity. We're going back up. Good, that worked correctly. Still some issues here with the grinder. The grinder does not, if you reverse directions at the wrong point, the grinder doesn't have enough time to grind away everything. But it does grind away the block above it, and since we are cutting away more now, it's just loose, and the spare parts will fall down to the bottom of the hole. But better the spare parts fall down to the bottom of the hole than the entire drilling platform, so I'm alright with it for now. Though I will probably try to make some adjustments to the script to make sure that we, when we do switch modes from going down to going up, we hold still long enough to get that first steel block fully ground down, because that's a waste of steel plates if nothing else, and it's also a risk to, possibly damaging the drill, although I don't think we're going to worry too much about that. So as I mentioned, there's conveyor junctions here. I forgot to mention the advanced rotor. Obviously it's an advanced rotor there. Needs to be an advanced one. The regular rotors do not have conveyors to go through them, and we need to get the stone and ores and stuff to come up through here, through the rotor, into the cargo container, so of course it needs to be an advanced rotor. Gone over the rotor settings on the previous video, so you can go ahead and take a look at that if you're super interested in that. But the main thing is to make sure, because I think that this is definitely making a difference. Let me just check the remote control block here real quick, or at least just check the camera for one of these clamps. Yeah, we're still pretty much dead center, so I think that is what made the difference, is just turning that torque down, because when that torque was up really high, every time we kind of would bind the drill even a little bit, it would, the entire platform would kind of counterspin and pull us off the guide rail. So I think that the torque really did make a difference. We're at about an eighth of the default. The default is 33.6 meganewtons. We're now doing 4.2 meganewtons. Although I did turn the braking torque up to 33.6 meganewtons, because when it's time to stop the drill, we want to stop the drill. We don't want it to keep spinning. So we're going back up, and this is working correctly, but we're not quite done with the tour. That's okay. This should just continue. I don't think we're holding right now. Let me check that real quick. Terminal. Drill manager. Yeah, we are not on hold. If we were on hold, the connector would say hold next unconnected. So once we get up and unload, it'll just go right back down again. Hopefully the merge blocks will be able to fix any alignment issues automatically. We don't have to do any of that manually. I can just continue the tour here. So went over the windows, went over the conveyor junctions. Obviously these are the drills, and this is where most of our cargo capacity really is. You can see there's 23,400 liters of cargo capacity in each of these 25 drills. So that adds up to, quite a bit. A little over 600, I think, altogether. About 600, give or take. Anyway. And there's only 400 and something in the cargo container, so most of it is actually in the drills. and most of it therefore is not being used in expansion mode because we're not actually engaging most of these drills. They're all on, obviously, but they're not being engaged in any of the rock. All of the drilling's being done by these ones here on the end. So you can see this one is not actually full, but it's filling. That's just because of where we set the threshold, and that's fine. You know, that's a bit of tweaking, but it doesn't make a whole lot of difference. But this one, well, we're connected now, so of course it's empty. Boop. And Clang has flung us all the way over here. That's one of the main reasons for the flight seat, is so that we don't get flung when we readjust the grid. Anyway, so these are all going to be empty now because of the unloading. But anyway, I'm pretty sure that it's mostly that end drill that's being used, and you know, most of these drills, even when we're quote unquote full in expansion mode, are really actually empty. So that's the drills themselves. We got a small antenna here, a small grid antenna, because a large grid antenna just takes up entirely too much room on the drilling platform. We don't have room for it. We put it on top, it binds with the scaffold. We put it on bottom, it binds with the drill. We put it on the side, it binds with the scaffold. So there's really just no good place to put a large grid. So we put a rotor here, just a regular rotor, because we don't need any cargo conveyor capabilities here. Just so that we can stick a small rotor head on it and use the small grid antenna, which is significantly less space intensive. And it turns out we can also attach a camera to the side of the small grid antenna, which is very useful, especially since it's already on a rotor. So we can just kind of pan around. This is on the same grid now, but we can just kind of pan around and see what's going on. I don't have any of the controls enabled here because I'm not actually accessing this through the remote control block, but since this is on a rotor, we can't actually spin it and take a look around here. I think I did show that in the previous video, at least briefly. So that's the camera and the antenna. Got some spotlights so we can see down through our glass panes to the bottom of the hole. As I mentioned up top, there's the cargo container for the steel plates, conveyor junction. There's the grinder with the welder on top of it. This camera is the one that shows the scaffold construction on this side. This camera shows the scaffold construction on this side. And this camera right here underneath the merge block allows us to look straight down and see what's going on there. That's something I missed up top, is the cameras for the clamps and the connectors. I mean, the connector cameras are really only so useful, and I put two of them here just for symmetry purposes because I got that OCD thing going. And yeah, we're not quite lined up here with the connector, but the clamps look okay, so I think we're close enough. I'm not gonna mess with it. I'm just gonna let it run automatically because I want to see how that works. And hopefully, I won't regret that decision. You know what? Save. So in case it does go horribly wrong, I can reload to a decent backup. So these are the connector cameras. This contraption here is because you can't actually attach anything to the top surface of the cargo container except for right there in the middle. So I had to build this up from the floor here, or from the other side of the cargo container rather, using initially just catwalks, but eventually I replaced one of the catwalks here with the info screen. And then the other one's then attached to the bottom of that rather than being actually attached to the cargo container itself. So yeah, these are all catwalks here, and then there's some armor blocks in here so that we could attach cameras on the sides, and the ones on the top obviously for the connectors, but these ones on the sides so that we can monitor the clamps and make sure that they're staying on track, hopefully. And I don't think that these guides here are actually necessary. I thought they might help. I don't think that they would actually help if it was a problem, just because they are light armor blocks. If this was really, you know, all that much force pushing these off in one direction or another, most likely these would just break and probably break everything else with them rather than actually keep it on track. But I tried wheels, I tried more landing gear. Landing gear was just way too big because, you know, these are 2 blocks high, and they would have to go 2 blocks out this way then, which would interfere with our merge, our locking piston here, and then would even actually interfere with the side of the hole, even with the expanded 6 drills, just because that is so wide, it would get in the way. So here we go, we're going back down. Emptied out pretty quickly since there was only about half, a little less than half of the cargo capacity being used. Distracted. Where was I? Oh yeah. So that's why I did that way. That's why landing gear doesn't work. Rather, wheels were not particularly useful either in terms of serving as a guide to keep this on the rails. But as I mentioned, I don't think this is really useful either. What really made the difference was turning the torque down on that advanced rotor, so we're not counter-spinning the platform every time we get stuck somewhere. So I will probably just take this off. Uh, since it looked like that briefly bound up against the merge block, it didn't seem to cause a problem, but that's probably mostly because I got lucky rather than because I'm any good. Better to be lucky than good, right? So anyway, that's pretty much everything on the drill, I think. Obviously, except for the code, and I'm going to do that in a separate video because that's going to be pretty involved, and I'm not trying to make hours-long videos. If you want to spend an hour and a half learning how this whole thing works, you're more than welcome to do that. I hope you will, and I hope it's interesting and helpful to you like that. But I'll do that in another video. For now, we're just going to go over the scaffold real quick. Got a big long conveyor tube out here to a connector that's just set to collect everything and throw it out. Since this is creative, I don't actually need to mine stone or ice or anything, or whatever else might happen to be down there. I should probably put an ore detector on that. That reminds me, just so that we know what we're digging into. But anyway, so we're just throwing everything out because this is creative. We don't care. This is not by any stretch of the imagination done. This is just, it's functional. It's not pretty. I didn't even finish the platform here. This is just so that you can actually climb up here and walk around. I mentioned when we were down there the ladders to move from the platform to the scaffold. This is the ladder that you can reach from around where the programming block is. You can reach out and just grab that, even though you're not standing next to it. Get you to the catwalk here. And you can walk back here, climb up to the top. Yay, ladders. Honestly, I got this game years ago. Played it for a little bit using the crashed red ship into the asteroid scenario. And, I didn't not enjoy it, but first I had a not very decent computer that couldn't handle it. So I actually got a new computer just so I could play this game and play it with some semi-decent performance. Obviously I got some decent use out of having a better machine anyway, but that was the main reason that actually prompted me to get a new one. But then I played for a little bit and lost interest and didn't really come back to it. And then started to see a whole bunch of YouTube videos coming out because they'd gone out of early release or early access or whatever, and redone the survival mode and everything. I hadn't actually played with planets, so this is all a little bit new to me. And to the extent that it's not new to me, I'd never really played it all that much to start with. Built a few fun little ships in survival mode and just kind of moved on to other things. Anyway, so this is pretty straightforward the way this is set up. There's another remote control block here, and a control station. I may have mentioned in the last video, I don't remember if I did or not, that initially these projectors were being controlled manually just to advance the forward offset and move the guide rails projection further down into the hole. As the drill moved along, I would just advance that manually and then retract it manually to rebuild it, once we started over. So those are probably not necessary anymore, but they're still there just, cause. Instead now that's all being handled by this scripting block. We do still need a reactor to control the conveyors and the connectors rather, and to power the program block and to power the projector, and probably don't even really need the antenna other than to access the remote control. But it's still there. Kind of gives a good guide of how far down away from the platform we are, if nothing else. So that's there. And yeah, these are the projectors on the guide rails on either side. They are a little bit further inside than the actual supports for the scaffold. These are about 6 blocks out. These I think are about 8 or 9. Anyway, they're out further because we don't want to drill these free of the voxels for the planet. We need these to stay firmly planted in the ground and make sure that they continue to support the structure. Good thing there's no structural integrity, otherwise this thing would be supporting like 2 million kilograms or something crazy like that on 2 single block pillars of light armor. But anyway, so yeah, that's kind of the design for the scaffold. Very simple, not really much to it. The only other thing here, and another reason we need power for it, is for these merge blocks and pistons that are, as we demonstrated in the last video, kind of locking the platform into place when it gets back up to the top, just to make sure that things are back aligned on grid and everything. And we are still aligned on the guide rails. That's awesome. Yeah, I really do think it was the torque that made that difference. And here I'm expanding the hole for basically no reason now. Oh well. interesting thought experiment anyway. And there's the connector on the bottom, obviously, for the unloading. But yeah, so these are all being controlled by the programming block from the platform. Once we're connected, it has access to them and can turn the merge blocks back on, extend the pistons, and get us locked in place. And then once we're locked in place, obviously we can mess with the connector and make sure that we're snapped onto the grid and the connector's not holding us in a wacky misalignment. Once we're connected and on the same actual grid rather than just a connected grid. But yeah, I think that's actually it. So this was a relatively short video just to kind of go over the construction here of the scaffold and the drill. And I will do another video to go over the programming, and that's probably going to be one of the more in-depth ones. Hopefully it won't run too long. But it does seem that we've fixed the issues with the cargo here, and this is running pretty well just automatically. I mean, this is the second trip down within the video, and I haven't really been paying attention to it. We are still very well centered on those guide rails, and we are making progress in expanding out the hole. I guess I can go down the hole. I'm just showing stuff off. So we can see we've got some blocks here that have been cut loose by the grinder just because it's not there long enough to actually grind them all the way down. So they're lights. They're kind of half disassembled blocks that are falling down into the bottom. And that's one good thing about expanding the hole, is that these are no longer, bound into the planet, into the voxels for the planet, and they can't actually just fall loose. The drills will destroy them when they actually get down here all the way. And I don't think they'll cause any problems there as far as, binding it up, since these are loose. But you can see how far down we are here. I can turn my signals back on. Drill head is up there at 156 meters, and the antenna for, I think that's my small grid ship, can just barely faintly see 239.2 meters. So this is a 240 meter deep hole that we've dug so far, just while we've been doing the development of this thing. And it's certainly not done, so we're gonna get pretty deep, and that's gonna be a measure of how long it takes me to get this thing working correctly and how much testing we're doing. I'll probably try to, I guess, copy a blueprint and move it onto a different spot once we're actually done. We'll see how it works, at that point. But so this is the hole all the way down at the bottom. See if we can tell how obvious it is where the lip is obviously where the drill is right now. Yeah, you can kind of see it there. So this is the extra one block out that we're drilling from that additional drill. And there's kind of a rim there. And this one drill is collecting enough ore to slow it down into mining speed, mining mode for the pistons when it does get down to this level. But as I mentioned earlier about the cargo, there is nothing at all in this drill. Cargo container is not full yet, so that's probably why there's nothing at all in this drill. But even when, the cargo container up top is full, this drill still realistically will not have anything in it because there's nothing underneath it. All the drilling is being done at the end here. You can see there's some stone coming in and out there. Whereas if we look at this one, yeah, there's nothing even coming into the second one in here. So all of the drilling right now is being done by this one drill head out here on the edges. So that's why the expansion mode is set up the way it is, to slow down the pistons so that we don't bind up the drill by moving down too fast, and to reduce that cargo capacity because we can't rely on the inner 21 drills to hold anything for us because they're not collecting anything. And that is one improvement I would like to make to the script eventually, is to kind of distribute the cargo in the drills a little bit more evenly, because that's something that's going to happen consistently, because every time we bring it back down, we are going to be shaving a little bit off the edge of the wall just from the side of the drill rather than the bottom of it so much. So that outside drill is always going to fill up faster than the rest of them, and then it'll fill up kind of unevenly when it gets down to the bottom, and that will affect how efficiently we can mine once we get to that point, especially if we're collecting ores, but also just because we are trying to count how much ore we're pulling in as an indicator of how fast we can move down. So if we can distribute that cargo more evenly, we'll have a better picture of what we're actually, encountering on the bottom and what we're capable of doing and how much we're capable of bringing in. but that'll be a fairly complicated script, I think, just because we do have to check all of the drills to see what's in them, figure out what the average amount of ore in each, or stone in each drill is supposed to be, and then start, transferring ore from one drill to another to correct that. And we won't be able to use the large cargo container as a buffer or anything, because by virtue of the fact that there isn't any cargo in those drills, it means that the large cargo container is full. So I've managed to babble on a little bit more about some of the kind of thought process behind, what's going on and how it got to this point, and all the number of times I've fallen down into the bottom of the hole, less deliberately than I did just now. But I will go ahead and cut this off here. Again, thank you to Kozaki for coming up with the broader concept of, doing the walking the drill down instead of just pushing it down on a big long piston construction, or welding conveyor tubes together with merge blocks and connectors and stuff. That was initially how I was thinking about trying to do something like this, and that's how a lot of the other videos that I've seen were doing stuff like this. And that's the first video that I saw with this kind of new concept, and I was very impressed by it and wanted to mimic it and wanted to make some improvements on it. I don't think I've really made anything that I would consider an improvement yet. I mean, it's definitely running off of a scripting block, and that gives a little bit more flexibility, I think, and hopefully in the long run, once I get the scripting right, a little bit more reliability. We might be there with the reliability, hopefully. We are still pretty well centered on that guide rail, and this is our second trip down without adjusting the alignment or anything, so that's pretty good. But yeah, I will go into the scripting on both the scaffold and on the drill head in the next video. I hope you're enjoying it. These are my first few videos of YouTube gaming stuff. I'm gonna try to get into a little bit more. I do have a survival game that I'm playing, but I'll probably start over and maybe do a let's play. Also like to play a couple other games, Kerbal Space Program. I'm doing, or I have been playing Minecraft Crash Landing. Also like Terraformer Craft, but haven't played that one in a while. Did Crash Landing a little bit more recently. Another game I'm into is Factorio, which just came out with an update I haven't actually gotten into yet. I was playing 1.6 for a while. Haven't checked out 1.7. Maybe I'll do a let's play on that. Crusader Kings 2 is another game I like to play. Yeah, I think that's about it that I can think of off the top of my head. Distant Worlds Universe I was playing for a while. I just kind of go through a little bit of a rotation. I'll get a little bit obsessed with something for a while, and then get bored of it and frustrated with it and decide I want to play something else. So if you have any suggestions that you'd like to see as far as content's concerned, or any games you'd like to suggest as far as stuff I should try out and take a look at, I'd be more than happy to hear it. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.